This wasn't just betrayal. It was planned. That night, Jesus sat at a table with 12 men he trusted, but one of them had already made a deal behind his back. For 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, he agreed to hand him over. And the most chilling part? Jesus already knew who it was, and still let it happen. What happened that night wasn't random. It was the beginning of one of the most calculated betrayals in history.
Judas Iscariot wasn't a stranger who wandered into Jesus' circle. He was chosen, handpicked, one of 12 men Jesus called personally, men he ate with, traveled with, and trusted with the ministry's finances. That last part matters. Judas was the treasurer. He held the money bag, and according to the Gospel of John, he had been stealing from it. But here's what most people miss about Judas. He wasn't stupid, he wasn't impulsive, he was calculating. And somewhere along the way, something shifted in him. The Bible gives us a detail that most sermons skip over. Before the Last Supper even began, before anyone sat down, before a single piece of bread was broken, Satan entered Judas. That's the exact language. Not tempted, not influenced, entered. Which means by the time Judas walked into that upper room, the decision was already made. The Passover meal was a tradition, a ritual of memory. But that night, it became something else entirely. Jesus gathered his 12 disciples in an upper room in Jerusalem. The table was set, the wine was poured. And then, he did something no one expected. He got up, wrapped a towel around his waist, and began washing his disciples' feet, one by one, including Judas. Think about what that means. Jesus, who already knew, who had already seen what was coming, who knew exactly what Judas had arranged, still knelt before him, still washed his feet. That is either the most profound act of grace in history or the most chilling display of knowing composure you've ever seen. Maybe both.
Midway through the meal, Jesus stopped, and he said something that changed the entire atmosphere of that room. "One of you will betray me." The room fractured. 12 men suddenly looking at each other, then at themselves. "Is it me? Lord, is it me?" But Jesus didn't answer the room. He answered one person. Peter signaled to John, who was sitting closest to Jesus, to ask him directly, "Who is it?" And Jesus said, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread after I have dipped it." He dipped the bread, and he handed it to Judas. In that culture, offering someone a dipped morsel was an act of honor, of intimacy. Jesus used a gesture of love to identify his betrayer, and Judas took it.
John records the next moment with 3 words that hit like a verdict. And it was night. Judas stood up and walked out. This is where it gets psychologically disturbing. Because Judas didn't act like a man who was doing something wrong. He acted like a man executing a plan. Theologians and historians have debated this for centuries. What exactly was Judas trying to accomplish? Some believe he was purely motivated by greed, 30 pieces of silver and nothing more. But others, and this is the uncomfortable theory, believe Judas thought he was helping. That he believed Jesus was the Messiah, a military, political Messiah, and that forcing a confrontation with the authorities would trigger Jesus to finally act, to reveal his power, to start the revolution. In other words, Judas may have thought he was forcing Jesus' hand. If that's true, and we can't say for certain that it isn't, then Judas wasn't a monster who hated Jesus. He was a man who thought he understood a plan that was never his to control. And that makes this so much worse. Because the most dangerous betrayals in history aren't committed by enemies. They're committed by people who were convinced they were right. After the meal, Jesus took his disciples to a garden called Gethsemane. He knew what was coming.
He told them to watch and pray. And then he went further in, alone, and fell on his face. The gospel accounts say he was in such anguish that his sweat became like drops of blood. He asked God to let this moment pass, but he also said, "Not my will, yours." He wasn't running. He was choosing to stay. Then the torches appeared. A crowd, soldiers, temple guards, chief priests, moving through the trees. And leading them was Judas. He had given them a signal beforehand. "The one I kiss, that's the man. Seize him." A kiss. The ancient greeting of friendship and respect. Judas walked straight up to Jesus, called him Rabbi, and kissed him. And Jesus looked at him and said, "Friend, do what you came to do." He still called him friend.
The story of Judas doesn't end in the garden. It ends shortly after, when he tried to return the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests. He told them, "I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood." They said, "That's your problem." And Judas threw the coins into the temple and went and hanged himself. Whatever he thought was going to happen, it didn't. Whatever plan he believed he was executing, it collapsed the moment those soldiers took Jesus away. And in that moment, Judas understood something that came too late. He hadn't forced anything. He had only ever been a man who made a choice. 30 pieces of silver. That's what the chief priests used it for. They couldn't put it back in the treasury because it was blood money. So they bought a field, a place to bury strangers. They called it the Field of Blood. And it still carries that name today.
Holy Thursday asks a question that nobody really wants to answer. How does a man who walked with Jesus for 3 years end up here? Was it greed, ideology, pride? Or was it something more ordinary and more terrifying? A man who simply thought he knew better than the plan he was part of. If you think that could never be you, think again. Next, Good Friday. The trial that everyone knew was wrong, and no one stopped. Subscribe. You don't want to miss that case.